Mayor, you ready to call us to order?
Yeah.
Amazing place, though.
We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. All right. We're a little bit behind here because we got tied up with the water sewer right there. Before we get started, I think it's important, very important to mention, for the sake of our council, to be able to go ahead and keep things under your hat when you have them out there. If you get on Facebook and you get on things out there, people get misinformation and stuff like that, and that's going to penalize everybody right there. We need to be wise and smart when it comes to getting out there and making decisions as far as what's going on and this stuff and that stuff. You may have a difference of opinion, but all of us work together on the council. We all need to be on the same page. And it's very, very important when you have somebody that goes against the grain and gets on Facebook and people read different things into it that are not the truth, then it creates a problem for everybody. So we need to really watch what we're doing on that thing, okay, guys? Mm-hmm. All right, everybody understand that?
Yep, understood.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now let's proceed.
Thank you, and just as a reminder, we are live streaming our meeting, so we don't have the microphones on loud in the building, but we are still recording. The first three items on your agenda are for action, and then the final four, well, the next three items are for discussion and just updates on some activities. The first item on the agenda is an approval of declaration of surplus police vehicles. And I'm sorry we did not get this on the agenda for last week's council meeting, but the police department has three police vehicles that they would like to be declared surplus, a 2006, 2007, and 2008 Ford Crown Victoria. And you'll see on page 4 that they each have over 100,000 miles on it. So the police department would like to surplus those. So if you have a
Do we have a motion to go ahead and...
I'll make a motion.
Got a motion?
I'll second it.
Got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Motion carries then.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda excuse me, is approval or consider approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages for the Montcross Area Chamber of Commerce Pre-Cinco de Mayo networking event at Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park. As I understand it, they're not going to be selling alcohol, but they will have beer and wine at their networking event, which they typically have at their chamber events. This would be at the Kevin Lofton Riverfront Park on Thursday, May the 2nd from 5 to 7:30 p.m. So they're requesting approval to have alcohol in the park.
I'll make a motion we approve the alcohol.
Hey, real quick, don't we rope off like an area or something?
Is Cassidy?
Yes, to my knowledge, it's not standard. Where is the
Well, I mean, I'm cool with it, I assure you, but I know sometimes they try to keep the alcohol outside of the actual playground area.
I think they're renting picnic
Is
shelters.
it like in a shelter or something? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, that's
sure
fine.
they know better, but
Well, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We got 2 seconds. Okay.
Let's do this first.
We'll give that one to Ron. Okay.
That's fine.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries then. Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you. The third item is similar, and it is a request, so approval of an ordinance to authorize the sale, possession, and consumption of alcoholic beverages at Stowe Park for the 2019 Garibaldi Festival, which will be Saturday, April the 27th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. This will be for sale, possession, and consumption of, I guess, beer in this case, in Stowe Park and Main Street associated with that festival. And this is the first time we've had a request at one of our city festivals, so Cassidy can explain where this request came from.
Just an effort to sort of add an additional element to our festival, to provide something maybe the adults can enjoy, since it's something that's typically pretty geared towards the younger generations, and just make it more of a similar layout to our Friday Night Live events, just broaden the scope of the event in general.
So the idea would be to have a vendor handle all of this. We actually had a request, I believe, at the 4th of July event last year, where we had beer and wine sales in the evening, And as they were setting up during the middle of the afternoon, a lot of parents came over and asked if they could buy a beer, but it was before we were authorized to sell.
So this from 11 o'clock to what time?
4 p.m.
4 p.m.
And I'll be glad to make a motion, we approve that. I think as long as we still see that family atmosphere and it doesn't cause a problem, for the history of that, for some of us, we used to have the beer and wine garden roped off for our Friday Night Live events, and it was one of the nicest things that Charlie Flowers ever did, because I explained to him, if my husband wanted to get a beer, then he had to stay in the beer garden and couldn't sit with me. And so I said, if we're really trying to have that family atmosphere, as long as people can behave, I think it's certainly appropriate to do that. So I'll make a motion to approve that.
Got a motion? Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion by Councilman Stowe, second by Ryan Tripp. All in favor, say aye. Okay.
Yes, Richard, I have a question.
Procedurally, I mean, after the second, do we have discussion normally? Do we offer that? I wanted to ask you, where did this come from? Was there a request for this, or is this something that generated out of the Park and Rec Department?
No, similar to what Mr. Miller mentioned, we did have some requests of the Red Black and Belmont event last year, and among discussion amongst the multiple department staff when brainstorming about this event, we just thought it might be an additional element that folks could enjoy.
Well, I mean, I'm honest, I mean, I've got some concerns about it because it has always been traditionally a family event, and I mean, I don't know. I just always don't relate consumption of alcohol at family events to having a good time on that. So I'm not, that's all I had to say. I just wondered where it came from. That's all the discussion I have.
My question is, how do we determine who serves it and what gets served? And
Well, they check IDs and everything, too.
It would be beer specifically, we're looking at bringing in a craft vendor, local brewery, trying
Okay.
to fit within Gaston County, and hoping that they'll be willing to staff, ID check, and handle that entire portion, so it runs similarly as it would in the
Yeah.
vicinity.
Okay.
And they check IDs and everything like that, too,
Yes.
Cassidy.
We
So
would ensure that they would follow those procedures.
So the interesting thing about Charlotte breweries is there's families all over the place inside of Charlotte breweries. It's now a family thing. So I don't oppose it.
All right. So we had motion, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed?
Opposed?
Got one opposed, okay. All right. Let's proceed.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is an update on the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. And Alec Robinson in the Planning Department will give you a presentation, but this is just a follow-up from the discussion items that we've had over the last year on historic preservation, and most recently at the 2019 City Council Planning Retreat, when you asked that we, as staff, we bring you sort of a plan on how to, instead of having a Historic Preservation Commission or Historic Landmarks Commission, have a Historic Preservation Advisory Board that would not be regulatory in nature. And so the planning staff has done some more research, and I'll turn it over to Alec Robinson.
Thank you, Adrian. Council. I'll wave a little bit of background tonight, briefly. Back in October 2015, we formed a study committee consisting of 5 members. Met most of that year, and ultimately that committee recommended a neighborhood conservation overlay district for our National Historic District. Subsequently, we hired a historic preservation consultant, Elizabeth Watkins, had extensive meetings with Elizabeth, and she issued her final report in 2017 and suggested that we implement implementation of an NCOD for these properties. After that, I was not able to determine a date, but the legislature limited our ability to control architectural features in this type of district, so that kind of went by the wayside. In 2018, we established and then subsequently held meetings with an actual historic preservation commission, which was empowered with the statutory regulations that could actually regulate architectural issues and so forth. After struggling with some of the mechanics of the board itself and a joint meeting in August, this commission was suspended to further ponder how future in that direction. As you know, to retreat, y'all directed staff to look into the feasibility of forming an historic preservation advisory committee. This would lack the regulatory authority that a commission has or would have, and that was your distinct direction. We as staff were not able to find but one example of a town that had such a committee, a historic preservation advisory committee. Matthews formed the committee in 2007 after some issues with Charlotte Mecklenburg Landmarks Commission. Not necessarily the best way to go into the formation of a committee in response to some tension, but nevertheless they did it. This committee meets quarterly. It has 12 members, and the members have 2-year terms without a limit on the eligibility. Some of the duties: research, preserve, protect, and promote the heritage of the town. They have directed that the historic preservation function be used as a catalyst for economic development, specifically to showcase farming, railroads, and mercantile history of the town, to develop community awareness for historic preservation, seek funding for HP activities. As a way of a comment, in talking with their interim planning director, he says that this advisory committee has struggled on occasion when meeting, and at one point it was suggested that they might dissolve it, but it remains today and they continue to meet.
Alec, what caused the, comment on what caused the struggle part of it?
Just having a clear mission, direction.
All right.
I obviously haven't read the minutes,
Right.
but you know, to me, the workability of a 12-person committee might diffuse the effort. This is staff's recommendation, and it is a recommendation, and please keep in mind that this is an advisory committee without regulatory power or teeth. Staff is recommending a 5-member committee. This is my suggestion, and I'll take the heat for it. Let's go with a pilot program of 1 or 2-year terms. I would encourage y'all to do as you wish, and hope that you would. As membership requirements, these also, further thought, 3 members must own a contributing structure in the National Historic District. We have an inventory, and it lists all the structures in the historic district, and they're either contributing as a historic structure or are not. And there could be an equal number, approximately equal number of both, suggesting that a member must own a contributing structure, and at least one member must live or work in a designated landmark. And this could be a dual role for that one person, rather than a discrete person. We're recommending quarterly meetings. Again, these are going to mirror some of Matthew's charges for their initiative because they're the only ones we could find, and I think they have reflected some of the direction that y'all have had in mind. Research, protect, preserve, and promote the historic heritage. Showcase our past, textiles, transportation, and retail. The committee could assist the Main Street program as a catalyst for economic development. Educate property owners on the benefits of local designation and offer assistance. We could have brochures made available. We could have material on a page on our website. Again, synergize with the Historic Belmont Foundation, the County Historic Preservation Commission, the State Preservation Office, for instance, or any other agencies that we could see fit. And lastly, amend the current zoning ordinance to delete the empowering sections for historic preservation.
I think that sounds excellent. The only suggestion I would make is, since we have a historical society too, I think we want to list them in the synergizing part. I know you've covered it with the other part, but
Yes,
they've been our
ma'am.
oldest organization.
An omission on my part.
And I have a different perspective on this. Is it okay to comment now, or? Because in the next several years, we're going to sell what we have, because I don't want to, my husband probably, we're all five, but my husband probably would divorce me if we continue doing what we're doing for 10 years. I still will probably mow the yard there until somebody else decides they want to. But it concerns me that nobody else may take as good a care of that property as I do. But we cannot continue this, so I think this is at least it's a start. I think at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, we may have to rethink and go back to the commission idea. I mean, that has the regulatory part, because just because the people in this room have this feeling of how much importance the historic part is, does not mean the next generation or even the next group of people who are starting the businesses here would have that. So I'm very much in favor of what you propose. And I do think we need to look at it in a 1 or 2 year situation. The other piece of it, we paid Elizabeth a substantial amount of money, I mean not huge, to advise us, and we need to go ahead and take that advice and take that first step.
Is this an action item or information?
No,
item?
so this is information and to get your feedback. And if this is the direction that you want to take, we could present a resolution that would create the Historic Preservation Advisory Board and kind of give its scope and its mission and terms. Take that to you at the April 1st meeting, and then if you approve it, then we can begin advertising for membership.
I personally think it's a good idea.
I just had one question on the rationale behind removing the current historic preservation overlay zoning district. Does that make sense to do, since it doesn't impact anything?
Yeah, because people, the pushback to my way of thinking that we got was people did not want anybody telling them what to do with their property. And we want to, and we probably need to, but I think with the amount of pushback we had, we've got to take baby steps toward that, in that direction.
Well, how much control does that overlay district actually empower the city or whoever to control it? My understanding was it was a pretty watered-down version. It really didn't have any teeth in it.
But we've never adopted the overlay district on the zoning map.
Okay.
The language was in place. We do have the National Register district.
So that's staying?
That's staying.
Okay.
And that's not regular.
This was a paper ordinance that was never implemented.
When did it come out?
95.
So it's dated as well?
Yes, sir.
All right, well,
Both the,
I don't want to adopt a 20-year-old piece of paper that we never adopted.
Well, no, the overlay was as recent as, what, 2 years ago? 2 or 3 years when they created that overlay?
And we've had the historic district overlay for years.
The committee made a recommendation, the one consisting of, I thought they came forward with some recommendation.
They never got to that point.
They never established it, you know. They came with the recommendation, but there was no overlay associated that went through the process that was adopted.
I think this is a good first step, and I think we need to move forward with it, because it takes out the part of the original thing with the Historic Preservation Committee was people telling you what you can do with your property or not with your property. But I think this is a good first step, and I think you can develop it over the years. So I'd like to see us come up with something that we can vote on the next meeting.
And are you good with a 5-member board
Yeah.
starting out? Sure. We could have staggered terms of 1 year and 2 years.
Yeah.
The membership I think one of the things that was important in all of our conversations was the people who actually live within that district.
What district?
Right.
The national district.
The National Register District being included. So here, Alex's recommendation is at least 3 of the 5 members live within the National Register District in contributing structures.
And one has
And
to
at
live
least
or
one
work.
in a
Okay.
local landmark.
Is that going to be difficult at all, item 2, or do you see it as a problem?
Shouldn't be. I think we can determine, from the applications, absolutely, we can determine it, to get enough to fill the seats. I would hope we will promote it.
I don't know how many, we could certainly, I think it's it's not hundreds and hundreds of homes, so we could probably
Right.
send individual
Sure.
requests.
Well, the only reason I ask is the board that we have, that we disbanded, I guess, it took forever
Right.
to populate that board. I mean, years.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to make sure we don't lose Jamie, and there was the person who lived in Williamsburg, Virginia, and very interested and has a lot of knowledge. So I want to make sure there's a spot for somebody like that on this board. I don't want it to be quite.
So there would be two spots
Okay.
on this
All right.
board for somebody who doesn't live in this, in that
Yeah.
district.
All right,
yeah.
so do you want direction on how to get applicants?
Well, we can, sure, if you have.
So we're not complaining about what you did?
Well, to my way of thinking, the first thing we need to do is, and I know this is not necessarily the same procedure, but if those people fit within the parameters of this that we already had on our previous board, I think that if I were the person there, I don't want you to re-interview me, because I've already said I want to help with this. So as long as they see the information, I'm concerned about asking them to come in for another interview when they already said they wanted to help to start with.
I agree.
I agree.
So-
I do too.
If they want to serve on this type of
Yeah.
board, I think they're.
Okay, we can certainly, so we'll reach out
So
to
start
the
with that board.
existing membership of the Historic Preservation Commission and see if they're interested. Those who are, we'll keep their name in the hat. Those who aren't, we'll thank them for their
That
work.
sounds
Okay.
logical.
And then we can send some sort of notice to people that meet item 1 or 2, a postcard or letter,
Yeah.
letting them know that we're creating this, and they would ask them if they would be interested in serving. And then, of course, we'll broadcast it wider to find those other 2.
Very good.
And then, as far as the text amendments, that would go through the Planning and Zoning Board and then come to City Council, like any other zoning text amendment.
Sure.
Then we can discuss, because the main 2 sections would be the section of the code that has the Historic Preservation Overlay District in our zoning district chapter, and then the one that has the requirements for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Right.
In the Boards and Commissions chapter. So that'll come to Planning Board and then to the City Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Let's scroll down and get it
Okay.
populated.
Next item.
So the next item is an update from our Main Street Advisory Board. Thank you. The Main Street Advisory Board has been working on its goals and strategic plan, and so we've also had some discussion about business recruitment and potential incentives for specific types of businesses to come to our downtown districts. So I wanted Phil Bogan, our downtown director, and it looks like you've got some board members here, just to give a quick update to the council on their work.
Thanks, Adrian, and my mayor and council. I would like to start off by introducing some of our committee members. We have, Mark Fisher is on our board. He also serves as the chair of our Economic Vitality Committee. We have John and Jennifer Church, who also serve on the committee. We have Tripp Blair that serves on the committee. Al Wall serves on the committee. And we have Mosala, who is been recently recruited to serve on the committee. So the 2 members that we do not have with us tonight, Mike Basco and Anne Marie Clinton. And so tonight we want to just talk a little bit about the overall work plan development for the Main Street program. The Main Street Board annually develop a work plan. A staff from the National Main Street Center, North Carolina Main Street Center comes in, spends 4 to 5 hours. We look at our previous work plan, what we accomplished, what we didn't accomplish. We evaluate that and then move forward in developing a new work plan for the new year. So what I have presented you with tonight is a draft of the work plan along with just the task for the Economic Vitality Committee. So we have 2 economic development strategies that we're focusing on. And the first one is basically a major emphasis on business recruitment and business retention and recruitment. We want to promote and work with our existing businesses, but then also recruit additional businesses to come into downtown. And the second economic development strategy focused on really connecting the districts with events and opportunities for everyone. And so one page is economic development strategy number 1, and then it has the goals and those tasks, and then on the back page is the second economic development strategy. So big picture, our organization committee is really focusing on strengthening and building relationships with organizations, really getting the message out about who we are and what our mission is. The promotions committee this year, major focus on retail promotion and big partnership with the trolley board. We reached out to the trolley board thanks to Jennifer. We now have 2 members on our, Nate has signed up and is on our promotions committee. He came to our last meeting. And the other young lady, Jennifer?
Ashley McAllister.
So she is also going to serve on our promotions committee. So that is a big focus this year for our promotions committee, is promoting our downtown businesses and really working with the trolley board and promoting that project. Our design committee, big focus is to complete the electronic kiosk and really bring more art and culture into our downtown. So tonight, what we were really wanting to focus on was the economic vitality side of the Main Street committee. To me, that should be one of our strongest committees as far as the actions, because I think that's really needed in our downtown. A couple of the action items and tasks, of course, they're all outlined there for you, but a couple that we'd really like to engage with you and have a conversation about is developing an economic development strategic plan for Belmont, which would include developing a toolkit for us and also a business recruitment package to use in recruiting businesses. Other is really studying the Esri market retail analysis to really evaluate the surrounding demographics, what type of businesses, what type of retail would survive in downtown. And so that's something that this committee's really been studying. Another action item is developing and maintaining a business inventory so that we really stay on top of who our businesses are, who are our property owners, and our vacant buildings, so that we are ahead of the curve and having that relationship with those business owners and understanding the rental agreements and knowing ahead of when we might have a space coming available. And so to paint more of a broad picture about our downtown businesses, I'd like to kind of give a snapshot of the classifications and what we have. We have a large percentage of office and service businesses in our downtown. Retail is only 9%, food and drink is 14%, and then 7% vacant as far as, and that's not buildings, that's also some spaces within buildings. But so we're talking about just our businesses. So most people may not think that this is a problem, but if you really want to look at a healthy downtown, you really want to have a good balance in your businesses so that you're not solely relying on one type of industry, because if something happens, then your back is against the wall and you end up with additional vacant properties.
So Phil, is this by square footage or by actual
No,
building?
this is just space. This is space. So for example, the Stowe building, multiple office spaces, so that each of those spaces are accounted within this, and this is just space.
So what's the total square footage of the pie chart?
As far as space, I believe it was about 170 spaces that was taken into account in looking at this inventory. As I was developing this yesterday, I thought, well, I could take this further and really break it out and have different pie charts to really show different samples of, businesses or buildings, and so that's something that I would...
You don't need to answer this now, but where I was getting at is what kind of impact would the commercial building behind the bicycle shop have on this pie chart? Each of those spaces, if it's 6,000 square feet, 2,000 square foot sections, and one gets retail, does that push it, or?
So, this doesn't, like I said, this does not take into account retail, but that does lead into, it does as a good segue into why we feel like it's very important to have that list of retail business that we really want to see in downtown, and already establishing relationships with those types of people, so that when we have vacancies coming up, we're already communicating with them, and so when that building becomes vacant, that we're like, Johnny on the spot, signing a lease with a targeted retail business that we have actually recruited, instead of just waiting and allowing to see what happens. So prime example of that, when on the right side of Happy Dog, the little jewelry store, or Arts, when that space is now empty, we were hoping to get a retail space in there. Matt, the property owner, Matt Nada, was actually talking with someone about who was looking at retail. I found out after the fact, then they did not rent the space, but another real estate office did. And so I thought, wow, if we'd have had some type of incentives that we could have sat down with that property owner to strengthen and encourage that retail business instead of just waiting to see what else comes in, I feel like that would have a bigger impact on achieving a greater balance in our businesses downtown.
Good point.
And so, kind of back to your question, we know we have 6 potential spots coming in, new construction. We should already be working with the property owners and know what type of businesses we would like to target to recruit into that space, instead of having 6 vacant spaces sit there for a while and just waiting to see what comes in. For example, having a vacant building, the impact is tremendous as far as lost sales in the community, lost sales tax revenue that the city, the county, and the state could be relying on, lost rent for the property owner, lost employee payroll, a loss of jobs in our downtown, and of course loss of utility payments in that facility. And so this is where we see having some type of potential incentives. Now, this is just me putting stuff down on paper. Our committee is doing research, looking at other communities, visiting other communities to see what's out there, so that then we could actually try to develop an incentive package that really works for us. And this is just, this is just strictly for conversation, potentially covering a percentage of a down payment. If we're sitting there trying to communicate with that potential new retail business, say, look, we'll pay, X amount of your down payment or rent to secure the deal. Really working through the permitting, maybe covering some permitting fees, looking at our current facade enhancement grant, which is strictly exterior, maybe look at some type of interior build out as an extra incentive to secure and I'm talking about businesses that we are targeting, not just any business, but very specific retail type businesses that we would want to see locate into downtown Belmont. Look at some type of low interest loan process, or really pushing marketing and branding for them. And so it's some type of incentives like these that we as a committee would like to develop, but we don't want to get too far into the process without really kind of having that conversation and engaging you to make sure we're on the right path with something that you're thinking. Because I know one of the things that's been on your agenda is really focusing on economic development for the city. And so we just want to make sure that we're on the same page with you before we move forward and too much longer into this. There's a lot of research that the committee's really been putting into this, this work.
Where would the money for these down payments and low interest loans come from?
Well, this would be something that we would package and maybe put together in the Main Street budget proposal. That's why we wanted to engage you early on in the process. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be all financial. This was just me, because I figured a question may come up, well, Phil, what are y'all thinking? Well, we haven't really started talking nuts and bolts. We're in research phase really right now. And Jennifer, John, Mark, Al, feel free to jump in, but we've just been researching. We feel like Belmont's in a position where we need something to really go after and really target specific businesses.
I think it's a good point. I really
If
do.
you look at just this Ezra marketplace profile data, you would see, maybe like a clothing store, the demand potential is $11,105,000. The supply is like $1,634,547,000. So there's a big leakage there of like 74%. So if we can recruit businesses that are going to be vibrant, they're going to stay here and not be gone and find a sublet for somebody.
One of the concerns I have is that part of the research I think needs to fall to you parks because of whatever legal ramifications there might be about us contributing money in those kinds of situations. Is that something we should be concerned about or not?
It depends on how you structure the whole format of the incentive. Economic incentives are allowed by some state law.
Okay.
Follow state law.
Right. Isn't the hardware store going to be a bed and breakfast? I've heard. Have you heard that?
I have not. Well, early on I heard that, and so a few months ago I did sit down and talk to Matt to kind of see what direction he was going with that facility, with that property. And I will disclose that last week I did meet with a group of people who were interested in renting that space and possibly doing an outdoor clothing outfitters type business, and they were asking about what types of incentives, and so of course I made no promises, but I basically said we have our facade grant incentive. What I did tell them about our Main Street program and our economic vitality is researching and working on trying to put together a recruitment incentive package to move up for approval.
What was it, LL Beam that comes in and does the old clothes and hunting stuff like that? Is that who that is?
There is an LL Bean store
Yeah.
out there.
So, given the work that the Main Street Board has been doing and your interest on having a vibrant downtown, obviously the retail market is challenging for lots of reasons, and having a vibrant downtown retail market is even more challenging.
Yeah.
So we haven't given Phil and his board a whole lot of tools to work with as far as recruitment and incentives and trying to get somebody or a retail company in the downtown space. So they've been doing a lot of preliminary work, but before they really engage on some specific proposals, we want to just check in with the council to see if just conceptually you're okay with the board continuing this work and bringing back some proposals for some economic incentives so that we can recruit And it would be, as Phil mentioned, it would be recruiting the types of businesses that fit with the Main Street Board strategic plan. It wouldn't be just anybody who wants to open, because if my math is correct, it looks like you've got about 93% occupancy, which is good. But of that 93%, it's not balanced. And so, we don't want downtown to become sort of uptown Charlotte in the 80s, where it's just an office park, and at 5 o'clock, everybody goes home, and then some people come back and have dinner. So we want it vibrant. So we want to check in with you and have a discussion before they do a lot of work.
So, just a couple comments on this piece. I don't, if there is a place for it, I don't think it's for 1, 2, 3, 4 people, kind of second career opening up a gift shop or a jewelry store. It needs to be more of a business with some sort of track record or ready to come. Somebody that knows how many employees they're going to hire, how much they're going to pay them. Yeah, somebody that actually has a legitimate business model, maybe based on the amount of square footage they're going to take up, and things like that, versus, that kind of stuff, because that's where you see, I think, more of the larger government subsidies come in, is on, like, how many jobs are actually going to be created. As far as maybe thinking a little bit outside the box, too, is using, money that we instead of spending actual dollars on incentives, looking at the other side of the sheet, with Friday Night Live, I mean, you could give them, free tents or something like that in the first couple of years, where they could entertain their employees. I was heavily involved with the hotel deal that's wildly unpopular in Gastonia, next to the conference center, the old lawyers building. If anybody's familiar with that, it's getting ready to open up. But it was wildly unpopular because people thought City of Gastonia was giving them tax incentives and tax money. In reality, all they're doing is any improved value of the building, that gap in the tax difference gets rebated for a certain number of years. So it costs the city nothing, and in turn it takes a building that was going to be left to die and gives it a second life. And so if there's ways to incentivize it on that side of the equation, where you can, and it's tough because you got renters coming in and you got different property owners. And so you got a different mix there. So maybe you can work something out, like if you're talking about the general store, with the owner of the building doing something to help the tenant coming in, and then we do something to offset the tax gap on reappraised value or something over the next 5 years. I think that's a better way to get support up here. I would be open to a lot of options, but I think that's probably your best bite to get more folks on board with something like that.
Just out of curiosity, Bill, the Belmont Federal Savings Bond, have you got any takers on that at all?
Actually, Mayor, I met, what was the gentleman's name?
Mr. Hicks?
Yes, Michael Hicks. Shelley connected me with Michael Hicks, and I actually met with Michael about 3 weeks ago, and we walked through the property, and he's ready to do something.
Good.
He's eager to do something with the property. If you drive by, you will notice that he has started removing the fence post and started to clean up.
That's what that is.
So he is eager to do something. His ultimate would be a high-end restaurant. He shared with me that he and his wife go to Gastonia to eat at Webb Custom Kitchen once a week, and he would love something of that scale.
Yeah.
And so I shared with him that I was actually friends with Jim Oressa, who owns that.
Yeah.
And so he asked me to reach out to Jim to see if Jim would like to do another restaurant. So he would like to do a restaurant of that scale so he doesn't have to drive elsewhere, but if not, he's open to office or other ventures, just to get it occupied. So,
Yeah.
But he has started cleaning up, and so there is movement there.
Yeah, good, thank you.
So he's just interested in being a landlord, he's not personally
Well, but he would also
vested in the business.
I asked him a lot of questions, and he's actually, if it was something that was of great interest to him, he would also be a funder and a partner.
Interesting.
Well, Phil, I didn't realize that our 70% was business and service. I mean, there's got to be something that's driving that. I mean, you guys identified the root cause. Are the rents high? Are people struggling with rents?
I would venture to say that Belmont, comparable to other size communities around the state, rents might be a little higher here, I think.
But I don't think that that's probably a reason why people wouldn't come down here. I think it's more on the demand side. when you look at the demographics of the downtown, and if you kind of compare it to, say, downtown Charlotte, where there's a lot of residential development that drives the retail. So to me, I think, and obviously, I've been working on the Chronicle and trying to get that redeveloped, and I just delivered the plans to Planning and Zoning tonight.
Yeah.
But, I think one of the things that would help with recruiting is that if we're going to build a nice apartment complex downtown with 300, 400 people that could help drive different types of businesses that are down here. But I think to answer your question, Richard, is that the reason why it's an office, people that live here want to work here. So I think it's become a natural place to work. I mean, who doesn't? It's beautiful downtown, it's close to restaurants, work. So you get to work and play downtown. So I think the idea is that if we can, if we can get the project, the Chronicle, up and going, and we have 300-400 people downtown here that can start buying things and on a regular basis in downtown, that'll help drive the economic development of our downtown. So I think that's part of it. It's not. I think it's. When I look at it and been working on it now for 8 years, the spaces, another component of space, not just rent, is the type of space. So you don't have, you have 5th and 6th generation space that's very expensive to change. So that adds to the cost. So whether the rents are not higher, but to go in and change the space, to adapt it to a retail space, so to speak. And I think I love the general store. Jenny and I love that place, and it's been sad to see it's never really turned into anything. But a big part of that is the renovation costs.
Yeah.
So how do you meld that into the rent and cost, because it becomes, sometimes it's just too much. And I think there's a lot of people, I can tell you, over the last 8 years, there's all kinds of people that have gone through that building and wanted to do something with it, but when they end up doing the analysis and the cost, it just doesn't work out. And so I think we have a couple challenges again. Inside spaces, I still think parking's a problem. I mean, it's, when you have retail space, people typically want to have, something that's a little more convenient. So that I think is a challenge. So if you add all that up together, is it's a challenge. So we're trying to dissect it and trying to figure out how we can maybe target some retail spaces, the retail companies down here, and then if we get some more demand down here, then I think that'll drive it as well.
Well, Ryan's point was well taken about, the type of business, mom and pop versus someone, more organized, I guess, chain or whatever. One of the reasons I ask is, that is a good point, but I immediately thought of Provisions, which, is a chain, was projected to be very successful here. I don't know why they left, whether it was just not enough foot traffic to drive it, whether it was rent, but I think that's part of the equation, is to find out why something like Provisions couldn't make it here at Belmont, because everybody thought that was a natural fit for us.
The conversation I had, and I don't want to say it's just the only reason, but his other store that was in Wausau, Blacksall down on the south side of the road, that was twice as big. And it's more efficient to have, if you're going to, manage a property, you got to have enough floor space and storage space and to drive your numbers. And it was a combination of, just it wasn't big enough for them, and the other space was a lot more efficient in terms of sales because of that. That was just one reason. It could have been others too.
I think success breeds success when it comes to downtown, and looking back at restaurants blossoming in downtown Belmont versus Gastonia, which is now starting to get some legs. But for a long time, you go to downtown Gastonia and there'd be one restaurant, and so if you didn't like it or whatever, you just kind of faded. But in Belmont, as opposed to going to Nellie's for dinner, a lot of folks go to Belmont for dinner where they'll just park their car and then go find a restaurant somewhere. So you have restaurants popping up everywhere. I mean, it's not unlike why all the Wall Street firms are all right next to the big law firms. It's people want to be together around other successful groups so they can interact. And if you had 3 or 4 retail businesses that you could plop down all at one time, the whole thing would go from there. It's just hard to how you build it, and I think it takes like a big anchor or something. That's why I'm open to some sort of recruiting plan. I just think it's got to be well thought through. It's got to be, it's got to be your most impact. And I support the facade grants, but you're not getting the same kind of impact from that as you would from something like this. It's a completely different ballgame altogether. So I'd find out what's working. Not interested in putting air conditioning units upstairs like they do in Mount Holly, but something different.
Taxes are one thing that you all control. And
That's right.
To your point about being able to incentivize investors to put capital.
The free market doesn't work in a lot of these ways, and Belmont doesn't like the free market anyhow, as we've all come to realize over the years. So if we can somehow steer some sort of investor behavior, that would be good.
So I'm hearing consensus to have the Main Street Board continue working on
Yep.
this and bring
Sure,
it back.
absolutely.
To
The benefit
build
is all.
some more tools.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next agenda item is a review of our land development project process with Shelley DeHart.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted just to provide this brief overview. Our planning board really keeps staff on its toes, and we report quite often to them on what we're doing, what the process is, and they want to make sure that we're not only doing projects, but long-range planning as well. So we try to give them an overview. It's just good to go over the process as a whole for the city. Okay, so there we go. So, as you know, one of the most important documents for a city to help guide its growth in long-term vision is our comprehensive land use plan. We recently updated it in 2018. It was approved. As you know, it involved a lot of public engagement, community, stakeholders, citizen planners. And when I use the term citizen planners, I mean our appointed boards, our advisory committees, even the general public that come in and provide us input. Of course, staff, and ultimately the document was approved by the decision makers. So we view this document as and it is a public document where it engaged our community. It's not just a planner document or actually even a council document. It had input from the general public. So this document, long-range guide for growth, development, and redevelopment of the city and our planning area. We wanted to make sure that areas are coming into the city. We had a plan for the peninsula area, for example, to 2038. It consists of visions, goals, strategies. It's used by the planners, developers, property owners. We get property owners that are looking to buy in Belmont, and they want to make sure the long-range plan for land adjacent to them is in an industrial park. So it's becoming a more used document. Other plans that we utilize are small area plans, bike, pedestrian, park and recreation plan, and other special documents like the Build a Better Boulevard document. All of these plans are great to have, but they really don't serve a community because they don't have teeth. They're a guide. So what we depend on is our implementation tools, which are our laws, our regulating tools. Sometimes we're a little bit limited because we can only regulate what the state grants us to, the authority that the state grants us. So we have our zoning ordinance is the development code. It regulates and helps establish the guidelines and rules for land use, building types, landscape and tree preservation, open space, and other performance standards with regard to development designs, the design of the streets, parking, subdivisions. We also have other regulating tools that are housed in other departments or other documents, such as the municipal code, the city's fog program for their sanitary sewer, keeping the grease and fats out of the city's system. We have stormwater, we have watershed rules, floodplain rules. So there is just a wide range of codes that are used by not only planning but other departments, and some are regulated for us by Gaston County. So what I wanted to do is give you a process example, and I'm going to use Worrells River property because that was a unique case that I look at it from start to finish. There was a public process that development went through from the very beginning, and it started actually back in 2016. The Crescent team came to the city and said, we're interested in coming into the city of Belmont. We want to develop a subdivision, and we would like to come into Belmont. So it took some research, and we found that there's an annexation agreement between Cramerton and Gastonia where that property was identified to be annexed in the future by Gastonia. So it took conversations between the county and Gastonia and Cramerton, and of course Belmont, to come up with a tri-city agreement for annexation between the three cities. All of this information was presented to the council under the guidance of the council, the interest of the council, and it was ultimately approved. From there, we continued to work with them with the annexation of this specific property. So that came into council along with the zoning application, and that too was a public process, public hearings that were approved by council in April of 2017. The zoning on the property did go through the typical rezone process. It was designated as suburban residential, which was consistent with the comprehensive land use plan and the direction the council was looking at in downzoning properties on the peninsula to about 3 dwelling units to the acre. So that was a unanimous approval for that as well. So from there, in April through the end of 2017, their team had multiple meetings with the city. They were trying to figure out the utilities, which is very complicated. Utilities, they were working on sketch plans. And it wasn't until near the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, they really submitted some formal sketch plans. What we call our TRC, Technical Review Committee, started looking at these sketch plans. Now, for our ordinance, it's typically done at construction plan stage. We do it early. We do it at the very beginning before a subdivision's approved. And it's going through the process, whether it's a conditional zoning or a major development plan. So that means every department in the city is at the table reviewing the plan. We have fire, police, utilities, streets, stormwater. We also have county representatives. Brian Skiba, the lead building inspector for Gaston County, he's at the table, as well as other representatives in Gaston County. So we take a couple of months and review the plans and continue to consult with their team until we get a plan that all the departments are satisfied with. So it wasn't until the end of actually 2018 that we actually established the process, because until someone gets a really solid sketch plan, we don't know if they're going to need any kind of special relief, or are they coming in by right, what the process is. And by the time the dust settled, through all of the negotiations and the redesigns, we determined it could go through the major development plan process, which again, that means that they are able to comply with all the regulations in the land development code, and they do not need any special concessions. So The major development plan is in Belmont, it's a public process. The way the codes, the land development code is written, we require that they go before the planning board and the city council.
You said in Belmont, is that not typical?
No, that's not typical. Typically, when you have a development that can meet all the codes, it's zoned properly, and it can meet all the codes, it's usually an administrative process. They file everything within the planning department, the planning and the
So you guys approve it?
goes tick, 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 yes, and we move forward. And I think it's an excellent process because it does promote a community dialogue, and it's really the public process that helps fine-tune a plan. I think where we end up with a better plan, whether it's legislative or this process. So the developer went ahead and had a community meeting, although not required, went ahead and had a community meeting for the project in January of 2019, trying to gear up for the planning board meeting. The plan then went to your planning board in February of this year, and based on the discussion, there were quite a few additional conditions added between the planning board and council. And then again, it went to the council just this month. And again, based on public input, there are some additional conditions that were added, and it was ultimately approved. So where does it go from here? So there's still a long journey. So based on the conditions and the work ahead of that team, they still have to continue researching utilities. There are continued dialogue between the Carolina Thread Trail, the Catawba Land Conservancy that regulates the Thread Trail. Based on the conditions, they have to resubmit a sketch plan so we can make sure that their redesign meets all the conditions that are placed. Continue discussions with Daniel Stowe Botanical Gardens regarding their delivery access road, and NCDOT because they are conditioned to do the roadway improvements as identified in the TIA. We want to make sure it's coordinated and approved by NCDOT. So that work alone is probably 6 months to a year. Then they submit their construction drawings. It goes through our internal review. Again, it goes back to TRC. It goes to all the other departments. Utility looks at it, engineering, fire. Everybody looks at it again. And we provide comment until it's actually approved. And that takes 2 or 3 rounds of review, so I put 6 months there. That's before they can start moving dirt. So where we started with this project is the discussion started in the end of 2016. It's probably likely we might be able to start moving dirt by the end of 2020, if not early 2021, by the time they satisfy everything above, and go through the construction plan, gets because they're water and such. So we're thinking 2021 to 2024 build out. So 2016, that's about 8 years of discussions going through the process. So it really is a lot longer process than people realize. I think we have very good standards, and I think that we should be very proud of our development leadership in the city. And it's a combination, I think, of the leadership here. It's also our citizens planners that are involved as well. Your planning board is outstanding, our Board of Adjustment and our other committees. They really vet these projects out very well. Some are engineers, some are architects, some are lawyers, and they all evaluate the project. So these are all well vetted, they're well trained and understand the legal structure we have to operate in. So again, I commend the city leadership for ensuring that we have an updated and current comprehensive land use plan. If you don't know where you're going, it's hard to figure out how you're going to get there. We also have other focused area plans in our comp plan, as well as Bikehead, Golden Meadow Boulevard, our development regulations. A lot of people watch our city with regard to our ordinances. We were the first in Gaston County, I believe, to adopt our own TIA ordinance. Mount Holly has since adopted, and they're using Kinlinghorn as well, and so is the town of Cramerton. They have followed as well. If we could get all the jurisdictions doing the same thing, we can help catch that incremental traffic impact in our region. I have researched tree preservation ordinances, including in Gaston County. We have a very good ordinance. It can definitely be strengthened, but based on what we're seeing on the ground, it's a pretty good ordinance. Our internal process, we continue to establish our internal process, and a recent change, a lot of the other jurisdictions are watching. I think we're the first in the area to require a foundation survey to ensure early that there are no encroachments. But when we developed this new criteria, the way we rolled it out is we had to partner with Gaston County because they control our building permits. So we needed to time it and find the right breaking point to actually implement it, to ask for the survey. Then we talked to builders and we asked them, well, tell us about your process. You know, if we were to stop you here and say, we need this foundation survey, what does that do on the ground? Well, of course, they don't want to stop. So by talking to all parties involved and making them a partner, we think we came up with a really good process that we've rolled out. It may need some adjustments because it's new, but we're waiting to see how it's rolled out. But it will certainly help us, and I think if it works well for us, we'll see other jurisdictions in Gaston County following that same process. Our public engagement, I think we're very transparent and not only follow the state law with regard to public engagement, we exceed it, whether it's for legislative or quasi-judicial cases. And again, the by right process, the major development plan process, it is a public process. We encourage dialogue because we believe with the input, we can help end up getting a better project for Belmont overall. We provide a lot of information on our website. So what we do is, when we get a project and we're working on it, we create a web page for the project that has the application, it has the traffic analysis, meeting notices, any information associated with the project we try to post up here. So people can read about it, identifies who the planner is, how you contact them. So that is up there for the project. And I'm trying to think which one of these. Let's see if I can go back.
Will you click on the meeting notice?
That's where I'm going
Okay.
next. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. Here we go. And then we've continued to evolve our process internal. And this is an example of the public meeting notice that we send out. Years ago, we used to send out this little postcard and it just said, when the meeting is. It didn't really give much information. So now we try to provide more information there. Again, we identify the planner and so forth. And on the back side, there we go. On the back side of this document, we have a site plan, a location map. We even try this bottom portion here, talks about, well, what is a major development plan? We try to explain the process to somebody. And again, sometimes they give us calls and they say, I still can't understand what this is, and we try to modify our form to simplify it because we're used to the lingo, so sometimes we need to simplify it. But we really do try to provide as much information as we can to the general public and be transparent about what we do. Okay, so again, we report to our planning board all the time and asking us what we do and what we're working on. This is our organization chart. I want you to notice our little tiger in the lower right. He's the most exciting one in our department. But we cover everything from the Main Street program, economic development. We have focus on environmental, long-range planning, more of the technical information, all trying to implement or accomplish the land use plan or any direction provided by this council. Department, and you're well aware of this, we do permitting, regional planning, where there's transportation, biped. We work with the various citizen planners or boards and committees. As you see there, we also work on special projects as they come forward. Last year, 2018, we did 4 conditional use permits. 3 had to do with infill development. One was the middle school. We did 17 site plan reviews. Those are the construction plans. After you guys approve most of these developments, we then still keep working on them. So you can see some of them listed here. Some you see, some you don't. For example, some are let's see, Queen of the Apostles is doing a large addition. So some of the projects you may not see, they might be just a change in use or conversion. Like Exodus Church is moving into the Haunted Mill. And
Are you going to still call it the Haunted Mill?
yes, no, of course not. So they're starting to break ground. We did 6 rezones in 2018. 5 of those were conditional. The one conventional was the South Fork overlay that placed an overlay over the 1,100 acres for the small area plan. We did 7 text amendments to the land development code for various reasons. Some we see changes going on in law, like the electronic gaming. There's changes going on, and we started getting a lot of inquiries, so we thought we needed to tighten up our ordinance in various sections.
So can you just go back? So that's a total of 32 lots that were approved in 18?
32 lots. Let's see, 20 lots, senior housing.
Not including the senior housing.
Yeah, for rezones.
For rezoning.
That's just simply rezones. Final plats, even after the construction plan phase, for developments to start selling the lots, we have to do plats, major development reviews. There's actually more now, but Warren's River is the one that was approved. Tucker Road is still ongoing. Amberley is moving from a sketch plan to a major development plan that you should see in April. That happens to be, it's an approved project for 164 lots. They're requesting additional lots, so we're making them go back through the process. They've done a TIA. It's going back before council.
Did their old plans expire? Is that how it works?
No, they got all the way to the construction plan phase. I mean, they've been working on it for years, so they vested to that point. They just haven't been able to sell it to any builders because of the development costs. There's a lot of topo and requirements. So they're going through this next process.
So they're not grandfathered into anything?
No, because if they don't get this, they'll either have to go ahead and pull their permit or it will die.
Okay.
So it will terminate at some point. Woodlawn.
So they're still vested in their existing plan?
Yes, they are vested in their existing plan, but the outcome of this will tell them which one they want to pull. We also have construction plans actually have been submitted. It's no longer a sketch plan for the Marina McLean. It's a really nice laid out marina. It's approved as part of the conditional zoning, and it is moving through the system now. So just overall, last year, 2018, 444 zoning permits were issued. The numbers below are the evaluation and the number of permits. We saw a lot of investment, reinvestment in existing properties, accessory structures, new single-family dwelling, the valuations, 37 million, new multifamily between the apartments and townhomes that were permitted, over 8 million, alteration residential, over $1 million was invested. Some of the other investments, we saw a lot in existing non-residential buildings. Alteration non-residential, $6 million worth of investment last year. New non-residential structures, 8 million signed permits. We have a miscellaneous sort of category. So total valuation, again, this is estimated on what the numbers that the builders and developers give us. It's not, it may not be the same valuation that once it gets over to the building department, Gaston County, they may show it higher. So over 66 million in valuation invested in our community last year.
That's pretty good.
So subdivisions, changes in our subdivisions out of those single-family homes. It also counts Aberfall, but we had 22 infill single-family homes. Aberfall was a mix of apartment units and townhomes. You can see on this the bulk of the single-family permits new were in the McLean development, 47 Conservancy, over Lake 23, and South Shore 17. This is a little harder to read, but it basically shows all the approved projects, the number of lots or units, the total vacant, and how much out of the total lots are actually built out. So that's sort of a snapshot of where we are. Of course, long-range planning, I covered that. We focus on transportation, some environmental related aspect. Our team is working with ZIP's team on the update of their park and recreation master plan. It was identified as a task in the comprehensive land use plan, so we're excited that we get to help out with that. Of course, economic development's covered by our Main Street program under Bill Bowman's leadership. Great job. And of course, we all continue to do the implementation of the comprehensive land use plan, and something that is just starting up with the new possibility of the Silver Line coming into Belmont, that alignment approval. We are part of a grant with other cities along the line to look at our ordinance for TOD development. It's transit-oriented development ordinance. So that will help us revision the alignment on Wilkinson and the land use adjacent to it. We can start putting into place ordinances that would help support that and create that vision. So with that, that's all I had. I just wanted, again, our planning board keeps us on our toes and likes us to report in on what we're doing. And
so you already did that for them? When did you do that?
I did it actually over two, not the one on Worrells River, that one I just grabbed, but all the other information, we did a little at the last meeting and some a couple of months before that, so.
I have a question, and it relates to Chapter 15, as far as the idea that if a development is more than 8 units,
yes,
that it has to come in for some review. Relate that to build by rights as affected by Chapter 15, and the strength that we, because there's a different relationship there. So can you speak to that?
Well, I want to make sure I understand.
All right, what I'm asking, if it relates to Chapter 15, and the developer comes in here and it goes through planning and zoning, it's built by rights, and they have a meeting with the public, they meet with the planning and zoning board, and they come up with these conditions. The conditions are brought forth to us. Are we voting on the conditions? Are we voting on the bill by rights issue?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna look at legal and help me on this. I would say both as well. What you're approving is the schematic plan that's associated with this development, so basically the layout. When staff comes up and says, yes, they're meeting all the regulations, here's the layout, you're voting on the schematic plan. Then what happens through the public process, issues are raised and the developer can indicate that they're willing to put a wider buffer or to enclose their station items, whatever the issue may be. And then we list them as conditions. And again, that's something that is above and beyond what our ordinance requires. So that's why when it's something like that, even in legislative, we ask the developer, are you willing to do it? Then we put it on paper, because if they turn around and flip it, so say it gets approved, and you don't document all those items, then if it's sold to another builder or developer, we want to make sure that whatever was promised by that particular applicant is carried.
But as far as the vote, we're voting that we agree with the developer, and we've come through this idea that we agree to these conditions.
Yes.
All right, on the opposite side, what if the developer says, I don't want to do any of them?
Well, then it's
Can we stop them
they're
from?
meeting the code, and it becomes more of
No,
a
it's by right. We don't need to vote.
legal issue. I mean, you could, I guess, technically say, well, we deny the plan, but you're just sort of setting yourself up for a legal issue.
So the thing in bill by rights, that's one issue. The other part is these conditions that we agree, because we've had meetings with the community, we've had planning and zoning, it's come before us, and we sit down and we agree with the developer that these are the things we want. So when we vote yay or nay, we're voting on the conditions.
The whole package, yeah.
All right, now, the bill by rights thing, what if, so we, explain that, Parks.
It's offered in our code to vote on something that's by right, but that's what our
It is
code,
upwards,
our
but that's
code
what our code
says.
says.
But what you've done is, you've set up requirements in your code, and you say, developer, property owner, whoever you are, if you want to build in this location, you have to meet these requirements. If they meet those requirements, then it's anticipated that you would vote to allow it, because you've set the rules as a council. They've met the requirements. So if you didn't approve it, you have to give them a reason why you turn it down. And there is no good reason if they've met all your requirements.
Yeah, it specifically says in our
And-
code, under that process,
and
you
you
have
talked
to
about our
put into the
ordinance.
record why you're disapproving it.
We've talked to
Correct.
as a council before, but some people say our ordinance is our laws. So you as council people are charged with enforcing your laws. Well, you can't, you have to enforce them fairly either way. You can't say, I like it for this purpose, but I don't like it for this purpose. But, you know, you as a council, as a body, have established the rules. Nobody's making you do it. You've done it. You've set the rules up. You put your requirements out there. They've met the requirements, and now it's intended probably as a formality, but the motive behind it was to allow all these other parties a voice in the process.
Exactly, and it's a great process.
So when you bring something to us bill by rights, then all those standards have been met.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're alerting to
So we
us.
verify it at
Yeah.
the original.
So you're saying to us, all the standards have been met. Now, the only thing we're talking about are these conditions that we can agree with them on.
Well, we still have to vote on the base.
Of the plans.
Under our code, we still have to vote on the base major development plan itself with the conditions.
So even if it's by right, we have
Yes.
to vote? Is
Yeah,
that
you
by,
have to
is that
vote.
by our choice that we chose that we would vote?
Yes.
I mean, to me, that's a moot point.
Yes.
I think we ditch that. If it's by right, it's by right. Now, if it's by right, and then there's some amendments, or whatever you call them, conditions that they want to do, then I think we vote on the conditions, but it's foolish to vote for the by right.
So
It's a done deal.
Yeah, so if it's by right, it's almost an administrative task you're doing, as opposed to rezoning, which is legislative.
Right.
And so in some places, that would never come.
Exactly.
It would be handled by staff, and if it meets all the requirements, staff approves it. If it doesn't meet the requirements, then it's a conditional rezoning and it comes to you. You have chosen to retain that authority to give you input, and I think it does work well.
It works well.
So for, last week at World's River, there was a question about, well, I would rather have some more woods between my house and these new houses. So if it were by right and administrative, we don't require a buffer between houses. We don't have a separation. So we would have had to allow those houses to be built right up to the property line and no perimeter buffering. But through the process that we've used, we're able to get something a little bit more enhanced.
But that could have happened anyway, because you came with conditions to us. That could have been handled
And those
outside
conditions
of
really were
the
sort
council
of
meeting.
above and beyond.
Yeah, they were above and
code
beyond. We
requirements.
do a lot of negotiation when we do our plan review, so we try to exceed our ordinance if possible, because at the end of the day, we know the developer goes away, whatever's left, we want to ensure that it's a quality development and exceeds the code. Personally, I love the process because developers know, they have attorneys, just like we have an attorney, they know that if they meet the code, that's why sometimes developers right here will say, well, no, I'm not going to give up 2 lots. Because legally, they don't have to.
That's right.
If they meet the code,
That's right.
they meet it. So sometimes when we're negotiating with them, they know the limits and they'll tell us no. But in a public setting and forum, in this, they're a little more willing to concede and give up more things. And they hear different voices as well. So I'm trying to think of some examples.
I'm a time and money guy. I don't need to sit here for 45 minutes listening to something that's by right.
Well, and if the council felt that way, that we would need to amend the ordinance
Right.
to change sort of the definition of the major development plan.
So it's in the people's best interest that we take them through this process, because it gives an opportunity to have them heard on conditions, even though the developers aren't forced to do it. However, it is not in our best interest, because we're constantly put on record for approving something that we have no control over. So it's really a matter of what's in the people's interest, or our interests, in my opinion. And it would be pretty easy if we could all stick together and we all vote and follow the Constitution and follow the laws that we've set forth. But seeing as it's typically a 4-to-1 vote and we just get thrown under the bus on Facebook and stuff, it makes it challenging to where we have to start considering what's in the people's best interest versus the process and that kind of stuff. So I would support the process, also not interested in a long-term career in politics. But I understand that we can take this out anytime and just rubber stamp it at Shelley's office and leave us out of it altogether. Although it was pretty rewarding the other night to get that guy an extra 60 feet of buffer between the houses. So I sleep well at night, but that's where I'm at with it.
So I agree with you, right? I just think that people need to understand what we actually vote on.
So let me ask you about the statement of consistency. You were talking about the land use plan. How does that play into all of this? Now, suppose they meet all the conditions and everything, and what if the statement of consistency, we didn't agree with it? Where are we at that point?
Well, so if you're speaking about consistency findings with, they are tied to legislative acts by state law. That is, if it's a rezone or if it's a text amendment of our code, that's when the law says you have to make these consistency findings. That was done for this project back when we considered the original zoning. The consistency findings were there, it was voted on, it was unanimous that it was consistent with the comp plan, it met the density, so it was done there. So once the zoning's in place, if it's just a major development plan, you don't have to make consistency findings, although we do look at it. And again, we try to make it better than it was. If it was consistent when you place the zoning, it should be consistent with the development plan if they meet the text of the land development code. So, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
It doesn't apply to situations.
Yeah, it doesn't apply to a major development plan, but
Oh,
it was,
wait,
I'm trying to point out, it was considered and consistency findings were made for the property when we placed the zoning. Again, I tried to go through. We did a Tri-City annexation agreement to even have it considered, then we annexed it in a public hearing. And then we had a public hearing for the zoning, which was vetted at the planning board and the city council. Consistency findings were recommended by the planning board and approved by the council. So its zoning, based on maximum density, was consistent with the comp plan. It still is consistent with the comp plan, whether we made it with the major development plan or the zoning, but we only do it for legislative acts.
I'd like to make one comment. I think sometimes we lose our perspective. We've come a long way since the 80s when we built our first house here, and we could get water, but we could not get sewer, so we had to have a septic tank. And my dad, in the major part of his career, was a county health inspector, and he talked to me about how unfortunate that was, because he said this land with red clay does not perk well. He said, whatever you can do to do that, you need. So whether you're looking at smart growth or managed growth, we've done that because you want water that's safe, and you also want sewer. You do not want septic tanks because of long-term environmental impact and everything. So we've done a whole lot, not just in Belmont, but in this region too, that sometimes we forget that, how far back that was as far as what we were not looking at that we should have.
The only thing I would say, I think the process is sound, and we need to keep up with it.
Well, again, and we're always open to suggestions if we can better explain it at the public meeting so it's clear to the audience, or any additional information as council on.
I think it's a perceptional issue. People don't understand it.
Yeah, and if it meets the code, you need to go with it, period.
Any other questions for Shelley? Well, we have added